Why, hello, and welcome to issue 712 of Geekinicity Radio. I am one of your horror. I went to be like, I'm one of your horror hosts, but I think it just came out. I'm your whore, Aron Duran.
And I'm your other horticulturist, Bina Rita.
What's shaking me? I mean,
I didn't know
I'll
what to
do.
go from there.
I didn't. I mean, it's a noble profession. I would do it if people want to pay me. It's fine. Whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we're all
There's no
horticulturists.
sex work shaming in this place. Yeah, I mean, I'm a writer for a living. Like, what is what? I give you of my soul instead of my body. Either way, I just want $1.99 a month. You know.
Ooh.
How's it going?
I think I have a cold. I'm grumpy about it.
No. There is
No.
nothing worse than Halloweeny colds.
I know. Well, it's actually kind of Halloween's fault because, like, October.
How dare you?
You go so hard in October. Next thing you know, you have like
Sweet.
given your last.
You got to eat well. It's the long haul. Halloween is a marathon, not a sprint.
I'm a whore for Halloween.
Oh, there he goes.
Yeah.
Well, if that were true, we'd get paid to do it. No, I was like that sickly kid. I get so excited about Halloween during like grade school and junior high that I was sick I would ramp myself up so much that I would have like an asthma attack and then be sick for Halloween.
Oh my
gosh. It sucked. I know. It's so bad. So sad. Ooh, that's better. So what's going on? Doesn't matter. So yeah, as we talked about, no Kaebel for the next 2 weeks because he's out there scaring children. As is what brings him joy is the way of his people. And by his people, I mean haunters.
He's probably scaring more adults than children, if being honest.
I mean, yeah, that's true. Yeah, probably.
It's not as funny, though, I guess, if you with the phrasing.
Although scaring adults is definitely funnier for sure. They react a lot better for kids than kids.
I always phrase it as like, as describe haunting as, like making grown men run and scream. So.
Well, worse than that, making grown men show their true colors and throw their girlfriends in front of them as human shields. I have told many people that the best way to test a relationship, like a few months in, is go to a haunted house. And I'm like, ladies, if he sacrifices I'm not saying like, oh, he screamed like a baby. He's not a man. No, fuck all that. People react to whatever. It's right. If he just throws your ass in front of you and pushes you forward.
No.
That's a man who ain't going to have your back when the shit goes down.
Right.
You know. Not that I don't think I'm much better. I don't throw my partners in front of me as like shields. But I 100% throw them under the bus and see a scare coming and don't warn them at all.
Oh, well, that's different. That's what are you gonna? You can't interfere with someone else's experience.
Like no, but also like if I know the haunters and I'm out on a date or whatever, I will text them ahead of time and be like, so-and-so's name is this. This is what scares them. We will be there at this time. I will be dressed like this. So whomever I'm with, get them.
A friend of mine did that to me. Her nephew was working at a haunt. This is up in Washington. And so not only were they being creepy at me, but they knew my name. And I'm like, why does he know my name? It was a uniquely upsetting experience.
I did that the year that I'm still the most proudest of when I worked for Fright Town. When I was part of Team Hong Kong. The horrifying, like, drunk Uncle Clowns. Sarah Dillon of Fun Employment Radio, I knew that not that night she was going with her, Greg Nibler, and some friends. And I told everyone, she's like, don't you dare single me out. I was like, no, Sarah, I never would. That is literally asking for it. Like the very definition of it. I told everyone her name, what scared her. I think, texted her friends that were going to be with her saying, these are the rooms to isolate her in.
Oh,
so that we can pounce. Oh, yeah, no. It was
Rude.
good. Anyway, what are we doing on the show tonight, Bean?
We're going to talk about more horror movies.
Spooky.
Yes.
By the way, can I just point out my background now that I'm recording from my new place? Look at, I mean, this is temporary recording, but.
Right. Just while we're not at Guardian this week.
Look at that.
I know, it looks so cool. It makes me jealous because I've been in this house longer than you've been in that apartment, but I have done zero work.
Yes, but my apartment is the size of your living room.
That's true.
Yeah.
Still.
But I got spooky fake candles. I got Haunted Mansion over there. I got the son of Black Phillip up here. Frankenstein's over there. Anyway, so yes, horror movie reviews. We're still in the world of horror.
Yes, we're going to narrow it down a little bit this week and focus on the older films that we've seen recently. And by older, we're talking 1920s and 1930s.
Yeah, we're talking 100 years of horror right now.
Ooh.
I do believe, actually, I think technically this year is the 100th anniversary, or maybe last year, of Universal Classic Monsters, because they count the Lon Chaney Phantom of the Opera as the kickoff, and that was 1922, I think.
The Phantom is a Universal monster?
It is. Well, that iteration of him, yeah.
Sure. Interesting. I don't know that I would categorize him in that way, but
I think it's that Universal put it out, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame, or The Phantom's considered a horror movie, so they just put it in.
Sure.
But it's
not an original property. Also,
right,
I just wouldn't really call the Phantom a monster in that same.
Oh, I know. That's a whole. You're gonna get me going. I'm that way about Frankenstein's mom.
I mean, that's everyone knows that now. The whole Frankenstein thing. So.
I literally only consider one and a half of the Universal monsters as truly monsters. The Mummy is a monster, Karloff's Mummy. And then Dracula, he's half monster. He just kind of wants to be loved. The only problem is he wants to use domination. He has a fucked up way of expressing his love. But Frankenstein, tragedy, didn't ask to be born. Wolfman, didn't ask for the curse. Creature in the Black Lagoon, hey, how about we don't invade your Black Lagoon?
Right.
Visible Man, science run amok.
This is us getting into it.
Yeah, no, sorry. I feel like before we get into it, should we talk about a sponsor?
Yes, let's do.
Sorry. Full disclosure, I was like, Bean, we're going to be locked in this week. Here's how we're going to do it. And then I didn't do it. You know who does do it? Asylum.
Yeah. Asylum. Our friends are back. I mean, they were never gone.
That's right. They never went anywhere.
We just haven't been talking about them for a while. But
yeah. They were like Batman Returns. Batman didn't actually leave. He just only had a second movie, but he was always there.
Just like Asylum.
That's
the
right.
holidays are coming up, and so they are back in our lives. So for us to remind you about how much great stuff they have in their stores.
Mm-hmm.
But operating hours are a little different than they used to be. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, they used to be 7 days a week way back before the pandemic. And it was one of those things, everyone closed and they reopened in limited hours. And then it was one of the things where they ran the numbers and they're like, okay, for the last year and a half post quote pandemic end, they're like, we're only open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We're still making the same amount of money. So why are we losing money by being open days that people don't fucking shop for this kind of stuff?
Right. Retail
makes total sense.
Really hard, especially if you own your own business.
Yeah, you don't have a life. So their regular hours right now are Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from noon to 4. I know that sounds super limited, but it works for them. It'll work for you. I mean, most of us are working Monday through Friday gigs anyway. We can't get there at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday.
Right. However, if 1 o'clock on a Tuesday is the only time that you can get down there, you can schedule an appointment and then they will make accommodations to meet you on your schedule to shop.
Yes. And just send them an email so they can make an appointment between 10 and 3. Pretty much clearly not Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They're open. Any other day, Yeah, you send them an email at asylum@pdxasylum.com, and they'll schedule an appointment. And look, if you're going to schedule an appointment, at least be, I'm going to say 70% ready to make a purchase, and like a decent purchase, not be like, oh, I saw this wallet on your Facebook page. Can you uproot your life for half a day so I can give you $9.90? I mean, look, a sale's a sale, but as one who has stayed open late in retail, and the fucker like, well, I'm just going to buy this Coke now. I'm like, really? You kept me open for 45 minutes and you're buying a Coke Zero. How dare you? So, like, be
Make it worth
aware,
everybody's while.
Yeah, yeah. But then in December, they are going to switch to 7 days a week, noon to 4.
Right. So twice as many opportunities to pop in and do a shop.
Yeah. And as always, 3713 Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard, right across from the Baghdad, next to Powell's. Facebook is PDX Asylum. Instagram is PDX_Asylum. Yeah, there's just so many cool things. And we're going to talk more about their products in the coming weeks and stuff. I think I talked about it last week. I'm pretty sure when we were playing Ravenloft last weekend, I brought it up again. But I am going to go down there this week and get that single candle holder so that I can just roam my 528 square feet.
Like a Victorian ghost.
Yes. I have a balcony. I will brood.
Yeah,
perfect. I will glare at people hanging out outside by the 84 on-ramp by Northeast Davis. It's awesome.
Definitely glare at them. They're up to no good.
Homicide of Fire Cow. Over my shoulder, that is not the Halloween equivalent of the Yule log. So if you have the Disney Plus, the new Haunted Mansion dropped, which is, I'll review that later. But the cool thing is it came with 2 ambient backgrounds, one of the outside of the Haunted Mansion and one of the ballroom. So that's what that is.
Cool.
Please don't sue me, Disney. I've given you more screen time right here from the Haunted Mansion than anyone else did for the movie.
I mean, I don't know that I'd call it like stealing content, that you're airing a, what is essentially a screensaver.
Yeah. But anyway, back to Asylum.
3713 Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard. The other thing of note is, I guess they will switch to 7 days a week in December, noon to 4. However, we all know that like the closer we get to the actual holiday date, more people are scrambling to get those last minute goodies and find the perfect thing. So they will extend their hours throughout the course of the month as needed. Yeah.
And we're going to go exactly. And like we said, we'll go over more of their stuff, but they have got a bunch of new cool items that have showed up. Like a month or so ago, I popped in to look at everything. And I'm excited to go back and spend some money. So, yeah. So spend money there so they'll spend more money on us so that I can give more money. So anyway, it's the circle of, look, it's capitalism. It is what it is, but keep it local at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Asylum. Sorry, Anton and Deb. No really bizarre segues this time. I forwarded you guys the email. He wrote me yesterday and he's like, first commercial, chef's kiss, had us rolling. So I feel like we should put together a media package that says you too can reach a completely unhinged form of advertising.
I mean, that's a niche service that we provide. It comes from years of improvising and our love of Asylum. I don't know that I could promise that to just anybody.
Well, I mean, who knows? Woo!
Woo! You get too warm?
It was crushing my head. I have a massive forehead. Anyway, yeah. So there it is.
Okay, so let's talk about some historic horror.
Yeah, so
I wouldn't call that historic. They're 100-year-old movies.
I mean, one's almost 100 years old. The other one is definitely over 100 years old. I mean, first off, you saw.
Well, let me pull.
Well, we'll just get right into it. Do you want to jump into the first movie that you saw?
Hold on. Well, I don't necessarily want to do them in order, but here's the jam. Let me pull up my Letterboxd diary. Black and white, like old movies that I've seen over the last couple weeks, due to the Mopop list. I think the very first one was Phantom of the Opera. More recently, I watched Frankenstein, as well as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is a little. Oh no, I'm sorry. Frankenstein was it was the 1931 version, so a little bit more modern, which I do want to talk about. And the one that was most noteworthy, the one that I want to probably spend the most time on, is the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari from 1920.
All right.
So I don't know. I guess let's save that one for last.
Sure, we can do that.
Let's do leapfrog order. Frankenstein. You're already familiar with Frankenstein, 1931.
I am. I mean, it's probably my second. I go back and forth, but it's probably my second favorite Universal horror movie, but also my second favorite Karloff performance. Ironically, the number ones are also still two different movies. So for me, number one is Bride of Frankenstein. I adore that movie.
So I'm going to tell you right now that I cheated. I know
It's very weird.
I was doing like random draws, and I pulled Bride of Frankenstein, but I felt like I couldn't, in good conscience, watch the Bride of Frankenstein if I've never seen the Boris Karloff Frankenstein. So
you can't. I mean, he's in Bride also, but that's the one that you can't. You have to see the original one first.
It felt wrong, so I was like, okay, fine. I will watch Bride of Frankenstein, but not before Frankenstein.
I will add, when you finally watch Bride, there's going to be a moment when you're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, also, this feels super queer coded, and and spoilers. Yeah, it is.
Okay, interesting.
But also, I feel like everyone who watches Bride, this is not spoilers, but I feel like everyone who watches The Bride of Frankenstein for the first time has that moment of, holy crap, the image of the bride. So this is some spoilers. So for a 100-year-old movie.
Oh, so, yeah, I was going to preface that too. I'm like, I am probably going to spoil some of these movies. And part of me is like, y'all should have seen them by now. They're 100 years old. Says the bitch who only just watched some of these movies for the first time ever.
And they're literally free if you go to your library. I mean, so
all this to say, sorry if you haven't seen it yet. I hadn't either, and we're just
right. So
this is what we do here. So sorry.
Yeah. So I don't know if we're gonna get to review it after you watch The Bride. The one thing I will add that is incredibly impressive about not only the actor who plays the bride, but but it's probably one of the most iconic costumes and horror and monster makeups of all time. Because you say The Bride of Frankenstein, you see her in your head. You know what she looks like. She maybe has 8 minutes of screen time.
Wow. How long is the movie?
Almost an hour and a half.
Okay.
It's just one of those things. It's like, holy crap.
Right.
Anyway, that was a long way to say that's my favorite Universal, but my favorite Boris Karloff's performance is probably The Mummy. His Ardeth Bay is kind of a genuine villain. Although his Frankenstein, which we're going to get to now, is equally impressive to me. So,
yeah. I mean, like at this point, the concept, the story of Frankenstein, and I haven't read the book, but I do intend to one of these days. I think you'll like. Is such a known. I mean, I wouldn't say it's part of the zeitgeist. It's part of our foundation at this point.
I think it is. I mean, even
if you've never seen it or read it, you know what the story is, and you know that the takeaway is we're the monsters, not the monster that was created. He didn't ask for any of this. It's us who are wrong for our mob mentality and for playing God.
Exactly. Yeah.
But.
Because, well, it's not even an argument. It's pretty much a literary fact in terms of, I feel like I want to add to this. In terms of Western literature, Frankenstein is the first science fiction book. It just is. When people talk about the first book that has like science fiction and then maybe like science horror, it's the first one. It just is, you know.
Where was I? Maybe it was you, but someone. I was in a group around a group of people, and someone said that like someone did some research or some thinking on it, and the last story that they considered truly original was Frankenstein.
That was me from a literary professor who told me Frankenstein was the last story that was truly original. And I mean that the idea of like man versus man, man versus nature. And then he expanded it. Boy meets girl, girl meets girl, girl loses girl, girl. Like there's these icons and Frankenstein was the last one that was original. It's not man versus nature. It's man versus hubris.
Right.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, like that makes sense, like objectively, but I'm not a studied, and I don't study literature, so I could neither. I can agree with that, but it doesn't really mean much.
Okay, that's fair.
But all this to say, like, we know what we know, right? Again, it's like so deeply embedded in our culture that one might think that I didn't really take much away from this movie. But that's not true. I enjoyed it, and you're right. Boris Karloff's portrayal of Frankenstein's monster is beautiful and touching in an era where there's just, in my experience, not a ton of nuance. And part of the reason I wanted to talk about these older films is because in some ways I'm changing my mind about silent films, in particular these older black and white silent films.
Oh yeah, because like a few months ago you were like, they just don't do it for me.
They don't. I'm a modern kid, and I grew up with a very specific and modern experience of what is storytelling and what is performance, and silent films are so different. And also, like, I don't mean to say that they aren't nuanced, but not to my perspective they aren't, because I am used to something much later culturally in terms of how to tell a story and how to act and what looks realistic or is conceivable within the parameters of, like, I know this isn't real, but you still have to sell it to me like it's real.
Yeah. And I also think part of it probably wasn't until the 50s where a lot of these films stop being treated like we're just going to record a stage production, but it's got a film camera. And you probably know, especially silent films, they still are shot like stage productions.
Right.
And we'll get to it, but I think one of the reasons why Caligari has an impact is that it's clearly a stage, but it is not shot like a play at all.
No. Oh my
God.
We'll
get to that.
I don't even know where to begin with that. It's so okay. So I am so underwhelmed, for lack of a better word, by most silent films that we're sitting down to watch Frankenstein. And I actually, in my mind, I thought it was an older silent era film.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was surprised by how modern and dynamic it felt, because the camera moves with the characters. It's a talkie, and like you get close-ups, and I mean, obviously there's been a lot of restoration that happens, but so too has anything from 1920s that I streamed has had restoration.
Right.
But the camera, the picture was so crisp compared to what I was expecting when I thought it was, more in the style of the 20s.
Right. And a lot of that is the director, James Whale, which, because he is he did theater before, theater directing, but his passion was always painting. So he is very much a person who tells a story visually. So I feel like he has an eye towards that style. And also something else I'd recommend, if you haven't had a chance yet, especially after you watch The Bride of Frankenstein, if you haven't yet, please, I encourage everyone, watch Of Gods and Monsters with Ian McKellen and Brendan Fraser. which is about James Whale's final days. And Brendan Fraser basically plays his pool boy. And
I've heard of this.
It is a beautifully heartbreaking film. That's the movie where I was like, oh, Brendan Fraser's more than just George of the Jungle or what have you. And it was my first real exposure to Ian McKellen. That was a long way to go, is that I think one of the reasons why Frankenstein and then eventually The Bride have this dynamic shooting, especially with characters, especially with the creature, is that James Whale was one of the few openly gay people in Hollywood in that era. He didn't flaunt it, but he didn't hide it either. And I think, especially in that era, if you're a gay man, you get what it's like to be something you didn't ask to be, and how society treats you, and you shoot said story accordingly, whether it's subconscious or not. And I think that impacts a lot of it.
Well, and that speaks to why The Bride of Frankenstein is on a list of movies that you have to see that does not include a lot of sequels.
Right. Yeah.
And this in an era where, presumably to me, there's not a lot of like IP recycling yet.
Not really. No, there's not really the concept of IP. They're just, and a lot of these are adapting stage versions. Like Frankenstein and Dracula are both adaptations of stage versions.
Phantom of the Opera too, right?
Yeah.
It was a stage production first.
Not as we know it now. Not the.
No, that's the modern musical.
Yeah.
That was totally original, for a better way of putting it.
It's because Weber wanted to. Never mind. It's a whole nother.
Fair enough. We can talk about that some other day. It's so funny. I was talking to our friend Merrick recently, and she said, I hear that you're like a really big fan of Phantom of the Opera. And I'm like, everybody thinks that. And I mean, it's not true exactly, but I had to like elaborate. I'm like, no. I'm a really big fan of the 1989 Robert Englund horror film, The Phantom of the Opera. But I don't think
I've never seen it either.
And I know that. Oh, so good! Oh my god, you should.
All right,
see
how
it.
about? All right, we should have a day where you show me that, and I will show you. I have the Blu-ray of Return of the Living Dead.
Excellent plan.
Nice.
Okay. But it's objectively its own thing, because it's. Well, no, it's not its own thing, because The Phantom of the Opera is considered a horror, but
it's the first time they go straight up horror with it, I feel like, right? Is that the vibe?
Well, yes. There's the 1921 film version adaptation, and then nothing until 1989, and they turned it into a straight up horror. And then in like the late 90s or early 2000s, there is a movie, like a filmed version of what is the musical. And then on the stage side of things, I don't know if there was a different stage production of The Phantom of the Opera, but it wasn't a musical. If they're exactly,
so
right?
There was this thing in the early to mid 90s, because I remember near my hometown, Reno, it played for like 3 months. There was a weird hybrid version that took elements visually from Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom and the Universal Phantom, but then made it like a comedy, and it was really, really weird.
Ooh,
I remember being like a young kind of little drama fag and being like, I want to go see Phantom, and being so disappointed that neither was it the silent film version that adapted to stage, but nor was it
the musical
fucking version. Andrew Lloyd Webber. It was this weird, like, dumb hybrid. And I was like, well, this is trash. How dare you?
Kevin said, The Phantom of the Haha, and I hate it.
That was it. It was so dumb. And I remember like my local like KATEV Channel 21, like they bought all the ad space. They're like the classic Broadway now comes with jokes.
So here's a funny thing is my sister, according to my sister, we grew up constantly playing like a CD version of like the soundtrack to the musical.
Right.
But I don't remember that, not even a little bit. What I remember is I loved the 89 horror flick. And then, like I said, like in the late 90s, they put out a film version of the musical. And I was so excited for it. But I was expecting a horror, you know, like in the same style. And then, because that one's not a musical at all. I mean, like there's a little tiny bit of singing.
Yeah.
This is part of the story that they
it's
all
part of the
work in an
story.
opera house. But yeah, I'm like, why are they all singing and dancing? What the fuck is this? Because as a kid, I don't think I was actively aware of the fact that there was an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. Again,
I mean, The Phantom is arguably the first incel musical. Love me.
Oh God. Oh my God, I hate that.
I know. And don't get me wrong, when I was 13, like I felt for him. I felt the pain of not being loved.
I mean, objectively, he's a tragic figure. You know, he is. Isn't he like a war veteran who's like disfigured and then got cast aside by society?
Yeah, because I think in the original story, he's disabled from the Napoleonic Wars. So.
But that feeds into your thought process, your theses about what each universal monster like is and stands for. And I don't not want to talk about that, but I want to segue into talking about Dr. Caligari.
Well, can we touch just a little bit more on Frankenstein?
Oh, sure.
Because you mentioned like it impacted you more than you thought it would.
Oh, yes.
And I'm curious as to why. Is it Karloff? Because Karloff blew everyone away. So when he was in the middle of filming this, he thought, because he didn't have a lot of acting gigs yet, he was cast by James Whale because James Whale saw him playing a heavy in some like gangster movie. And he was halfway through filming and he told, I forgot, there's so many fun stories. Like so one time he went to the commissary in his Frankenstein's monster makeup and he made a woman pass out. So after that, he was not allowed to walk around the set without a veil over his head, lest he harm the women that worked for Carl Laemmle. And Carl Laemmle Jr., who's the producer on that. Anyway, he was convinced. He's like, oh my God, my camera froze. Can you hear me still, Bean?
Yes, I can still hear you.
All right, I'm not going to fight with it anymore then. If you can still hear me, it's fine. He was convinced that this was going to end his career. He's like, well, I'm playing a monster. I'm done. And I think someone else at Universal was like, no, you don't understand. You've made it. Like, your performance changes everything. And this is 1932, you know? So, yeah, I mean, and part of it is like the makeup is great. This is considered, especially by effects people like our friend Claire, like Frankenstein is considered when creature effects makeup began. Like this is the one. Like even the reason why his face looks so gaunt is Karloff removed the bridge in his mouth so that it pulled his cheeks in more.
How old was he?
I mean, not that old, but remember, this is back in the day. People they were harder lives then.
Sure. I mean, like, I would have taken that with context. It was 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's a very effective way to change your face. I just assumed it was makeup. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago with Lon Chaney and Phantom of the Opera. I'm like, that's what everyone is supposed to be so afraid of. It looks almost cartoonish. Yeah, but he did that with just makeup, And I'm like, well, okay, that's something. Again, right. Like I'm of a different era, and so my expectations are just different. especially because I didn't grow up with a lot of things that predate my own era or even the era of my parents. Um,
Right. That's fair.
the appearance is really not that much of what I appreciated, because just like the concept of Frankenstein, being so foundational in our culture, so is his look. Just like you were saying, like, I've never seen Bride of Frankenstein, but I can fucking tell you what she looks like.
Yeah.
Those are already iconic, so they can't. I won't say they can't, but they aren't making a fresh impact on me now when I see these movies. Well, it's his performance. There's like, I don't know that pathos is the right word, but like
I think
you
it is. Yeah.
he really sells the idea. That Karloff really performs in such a way that I believe that this creature is experiencing certain things for the first time, is getting carried away with positive and negative emotions,
Hmm.
doesn't know how to respond to his own fear.
There's a
Um,
there's a there's a heart-achingly childlessness with him. Like he's a child in the beginning, the way he acts,
mhm.
and like like spoilers when he kills Fritz, like how can you be mad at that? Like
No,
the
Fritz
dude
had it
fucking
fucking
shoves.
coming.
No, he had a. Well, even Dr. Frankenstein was like, Fritz always tormented him. And that guy's
Yes.
mentor's like, no, kill him. And I'm like, fuck you. Like, this thing
No,
didn't ask to be born. And then this dude comes up from the stairs and shoves a torch in his face.
yeah, you're right. You're right. I don't think I'd really thought about that element in particular. Um, for the most part, I was like, well, he doesn't know he doesn't know the harm he's causing. But you're right. Like, Fritz abused him, and that
Yeah.
changes who you are and how you interact with the rest of the world. And so I don't. I mean, like, and then the scene with the little girl. I don't think he
Right.
intended to hurt her, but then there are other things that happen further down the road that
It's,
are harmful, and they're not out of innocence or
yeah. And
naivety.
that scene with Karloff was hard. He actually, he didn't want the monster. He's like, why would I throw her? Can I just set her in the water? And they're like, and Whale was like, I get what you're saying, but the fact is that he doesn't understand yet. So that when she doesn't come out of the water, he's terrified. He's so scared.
Right, and then he's just like running panicked through the
Hmm.
woods.
And
And
then everyone,
even if he had like any kind of malice in that scene, why is that little girl playing unsupervised next to a body of water? Because obviously she didn't know how to swim.
I always think that too, especially when I was younger. I was like, this bitch, why can't she swim? She grew up
I
near a
don't know.
lake.
I don't know what Germans used to do. Oh, I definitely made a joke about how, like, when the mob is coming for him and they're like crossing town as a mob, I'm like,
Yeah.
there's some Nazis in that group, right?
Well, I think during the era this is supposed to take place in, proto-Nazis.
Yeah. I mean, like, I know that it's a little early for them
It's
to
a
be
little
party
early.
members, but there are people who then it doesn't only like an 8-year gap. That there are people there who
Well,
did
I mean,
come.
so it's funny, like, so it's a scene that got cut. There's a scene that has a horse-drawn carriage with Elizabeth and the dude who's pining for her, who has no point in this movie at all. And then the dad. They show up in a horse-drawn carriage, and it was cut, whether it be for time or to make it seem timeless. I know when they promoted it, they called it a modern story, but it's
I did
clearly not.
notice, even though I believe Frankenstein was published or written in like 1882 or some such. I could
Even
tell
earlier, but yeah.
that it was that particular film anyway was produced to be contemporary.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting choice. But so you're saying that they omitted certain elements of what they filmed so that it would not seem so of a particular era.
Yeah, whether that was for time or whatever, but yeah.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
So let's yeah, it's an impactful movie. It's still as the kids like it still works. Like yes, it's very much filmmaking style of the era, but the themes are still there. The performances aren't bad. Some are over the top. I think the guy who plays Victor Frankenstein's very good, especially when he wants to look sinister. Like when his like mentor is like, yeah, I taught you everything, and he's like, everything? Do you want me to show you what I've discovered, doctor? I'm like, oh, you and then Karloff is just he's so good in it. He's great. And it's still an emotional performance almost 100 years later.
The thing I didn't love, and I'm not sure if this is true to the book or not, but the character of the doctor who they renamed from isn't in the book, isn't it Victor Frankenstein?
Yeah, and it's what Henry in the
it's Henry.
movie?
There is a Victor,
yeah,
which was a little bit confusing if you're not paying super good attention. But yeah, Frankenstein, the doctor, the young man, gets renamed Henry. But at any rate, I mean, he does the iconic "It's alive, it's alive." Like now, like this is what it feels like to be God, which is like pivotal to the movie, right? Because it's all about the hubris of man. But outside of that and the fact that he did any of this, I feel like they did too much to make his character likable, not likable, but just like not the bad guy in any of this.
Yeah, you're supposed to like. It's weird. You're supposed to first see him as a villain in that he dares challenge God, but then but now I'm the hero to destroy my creation, which is not.
Yeah, he was. At
not
no point does he defend his decisions. He's all about controlling the monster, taking down the monster. I can't be married and have a happy life when I know my terrible creation is out there, and that didn't ring true to the same character who would even do such a thing in the first place. And then say out loud, now I know what it is to be God.
So here's the funny thing. Couple of things. First, the quote, it's alive, is the most replicated line from cinema history. Other movies have used it so often. It gets used all the time. Whether it's mainly parody and satire now.
Yeah, but Robot Chicken is the one that always comes to mind.
Yeah. First. So if you get a chance, rewatch that scene when he goes, it's alive, oh my God, it's alive. When you listen to him say, now I know what it feels like to be God, if the sound sounds weird, it's because that was censored. The censors saw that and lost their shit. That line didn't get brought back until Frankenstein came out on DVD.
I'm not surprised by that. Oh, that reminds me.
So Christian, 70 years for that line to get put back in.
Christian watched it with me, and he noticed that the scene where the monster throws the little girl into the water, he felt like that little bit of the footage was not as quality as the rest. Like it was grainier, and he wondered if maybe at some point they had omitted that little section because it is like a violence against children, and then later it was restored. But I don't know. I didn't catch my eye in that same way. What I do remember now is that at the beginning of the film, someone comes out on stage as though you're seeing it in a live theater to warn you about how shocking this film is going to be, and like if you're of a delicate constitution, like this is your is your sign, and if you don't leave, well, we warned you.
So that was done intentionally, Barry. So the movie's produced by Carl Laemmle Jr. His father, Carl Laemmle, big-time Golden Age of Hollywood guy. So they screened this film initially, I think in like fucking Kansas City. And people passed out.
Oh my God.
They ran from the theater. They passed out.
What parts made them pass out?
You got to remember, again, it's fucking what, 32? Like, it's just,
31.
this shit just wasn't filmed. You didn't see this.
Which
So
parts were shocking? I'm
I don't know.
legitimately not clear. Like, is it when they throw little girls in the river to
No,
drown? Is it
I'll
just
get
the
to that in a
idea of
minute.
making a monster, or the fact that he said God? I'm like
I
God.
think it's that he's like made from. I don't know, but the story is that people passed out, and Carl Laemmle told his son, "We need to film a warning so people can leave if they need to." The other weird thing, so the part with the young girl, the reason why some of it looks kind of like tweaked and edited is that the part where he throws her in the lake, around the Red Scare, so not during the initial release, but during the 50s and early 60s, that scene for some reason was cut out for various reasons. It got put back in the mid to late 80s because people began to write that it seems more sinister. You see Frankenstein's monster look at the girl with that like that weird face.
Oh.
Because mainly he's curious, and then it cuts to her limp, lifeless body in her dad's hands, and people were like, "What did he do to the little girl?" So they put the scene back in to be like, "No, no,
to people's imaginations, it's actually worse.
it's so much worse." Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway.
Wow, that had not occurred to me.
Yeah.
Makes sense though, because people are terrible.
Yes. Which is the point of Frankenstein, you could argue. People are terrible.
But overall, I did enjoy it. I was not like wildly moved by the story or compelled by the story. But again, like I'm maybe too familiar with it at this point, despite having never seen it. The best thing about it is Karloff's performance.
It's Karloff. I mean, there's a reason why he intentionally said, "Do not credit me" at the beginning.
I saw that, and that was interesting.
And because they didn't want people to think like, "Oh, Karloff, he's done these crime movies. What's he doing now?" They didn't want him to be credited. He was like, "Don't put my name until the end." That's why I think at the beginning it says the monster question mark until the final credit.
Yeah, and I enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was cool. All right, you want to jump into your Caligari?
Yes.
So I'm gonna let you take it away because I feel like you had a special experience with that.
I did. Okay, so here we go. Again, we just spent all this time talking about how not excited I get about silent black and white films. And I cannot deny that the experience that I had on Friday going to the Clinton Street Theater with friends to watch a silent movie, foreign also, that I've never seen, but with a band that performed a live score. Obviously that influenced the experience. All of those elements, and like talking about it before and talking about it after, and
you had the situation. You had like the perfect storm of a great Halloween theater going experience.
Yes. And I'm still sad that I missed Nosferatu with an organist last year at the Hollywood, because thanks, COVID.
Oh, I've seen it twice that way now, and I love it.
Yeah. There are other movies that are being played that way, but not Nosferatu, and not on a day that I can attend. So that's still a bummer. But one of the things that I have noticed when I watch a silent film is that, okay, so they give you cards to read, and between that and the performance, you're supposed to pick up on the nuances of the storytelling and see, like there's what they said, but there's what they're doing on camera, and thus you know what they feel and understand. And a hammer, like, bonk bonk on the head, like you're overdoing it in my mind whenever I watch a silent
film. I love that you
now
like, say bonk bonk on the head.
I know you've ruined me. I'm like, I get it. Like, this is scary, this is sad. Okay, yes, I understand. Like, you've made your point quite clear. But again, I have 100 years more storytelling diversity to lean back on and say like,
Sure.
you're selling past the close, friend. Like you're really hamming it up right now. And
Which I'm very guilty of when I push a silent film on you. I'm like, no, it's life changing. And you're like, ease back, Duran.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to sort of like divorce myself from who I am in this time and place, and picture what it must be like to watch like the fourth movie ever made, and what sort of like context one has to that. Like, I was born in front of a television, you know. But that being said, I'm not reticent to say this is maybe like the best silent movie ever. It's definitely the best silent movie I've ever seen, despite the fact that like obviously things were leaning very much in its favor, and you know, like all of these other elements to my
I also think to a weird extent, it kind of at like a primal level for you, it's kind of bleak. So it's already kind of ticking that little box within your soul. Like Nosferatu is bleak, but it's different. This is just like, no, we have survived. It's just, yeah.
No, you're actually right. So again, like, sorry for anyone who, like me, up until last week, still hasn't seen this movie from 100 years ago. Sorry if I'm spoiling anything, but I actually hadn't considered how bleak the ending is, and how much I love that shit. But like the first thing I'm like, they fucking did a Shutter Island. It's the first thing I thought of. No, let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the beginning.
Okay, yeah.
The sets, the aesthetic of the movie is so wonderful, and like it's almost whimsical, right? And even though it's a horror, I'm like, I bet you fucking $5 million American dollars that Tim Burton loves this movie.
Oh, without question. If he doesn't say that he's not influenced by it, he's full of shit.
Yeah, absolutely. He'd be fucking lying. We'd all know it. But it's an aesthetic that I've always enjoyed. It's almost like cartoonish, which only adds to like the darkness of the story. And then the fact that it's a story within a story, and it's a little bit on the longer side. So like by the time you start getting towards the end, not only forget that the movie started by a guy going like, let me tell you the story about this crazy shit that happened to us. But even if you didn't forget that part of it, this foil that you're in, you don't know when the movie started that those people are mental hospital patients. And it's only when you come back to the very end again, and like that you come back to those characters, and he's like, right? Wasn't that a wild story? And you're like, I mean, like, I'm not like trying to brag or anything, but like as soon as things start to get revealed, you know, that's when you have those milliseconds like reactions of guessing the reveal right before it comes. But normally I'm used to having those moments, you know, 20 minutes from the start. So the fact that they had me going the whole time, and only up until they were right about to reveal, like, by the way, we tricked you. These guys were in the insane asylum the whole time. They got me, and I fucking appreciate the shit out of that. But also, that's what makes it this like super bleak, almost heart-wrenching, you know, outcome.
Which almost feels inevitable when you consider where it came from. Like, this is one of the first times that like German films were allowed to be even screened after World War I. Because, like, you know, spoilers, the world was not happy with Germany after World War I. Arguably, how we treated them laid the foundation for World War II.
Yes, it's not even an argument.
Not even an argument. But like when you learn more, like both the writers of this film were both pacifists during World War One. They found the war to be obscene. I think it was Janowitz who did serve.
Mm-hmm.
And when he left, he had nothing but disdain for the very concept of militaries and the state.
Good for
But
him.
this will lead into the whole insane asylum thing. But Mayer, he didn't go to war by pretending to be insane. He spent most of the war being analyzed by German psychologists to find out whether or not he was sane enough to go to war. And he pulled it off the entire time, which probably altered his viewpoint on the world. And then they wrote this movie.
Not just the world, but also the medical and healthcare system.
Yeah.
The mental healthcare system.
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually seems very evident. Like, not only is it the idea that these patients in this mental healthcare facility are, or at least one of them, is living out a fantasy world that involves all of his co-patients, but also he's not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like oh, I have this wild dream that the doctor is this sinister guy and he's the reason that my buddy died. But then at the end, the doctor turns out to actually be a pretty sinister guy, or at least that's the implication. It's just like such a fucking like Mobius strip of like sinister dude and a guy who's unwell.
Right.
There's a better way to like boil that down, but
no, I get what you mean.
My point is made.
Right.
And yes, you're right. It is technically a very bleak outcome that, like, oh, it was all a dream, or was it? Because it turns out because it turns out that like the guy. And I mean, I guess it shouldn't come as some surprise, right? Like, just because you're maybe a little bit insane doesn't mean you're wrong about this one guy who's maybe a bad guy and manipulating you for his own devices.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I loved it so much. I got the T-shirt, or the band's T-shirt. Anyway.
Look at that!
I don't know if I can. Like,
that's cool.
Give you like a good picture, but yeah, it's the band is called Sleep Bomb, and they performed a live score to the entire film. And I think I touched on this earlier. One of the things that is like the least satisfying thing for me when watching a silent film, or maybe I should say like the thing that is like most jarring in a silent film, is that the music is frequently not really in rhythm with the story. Like, even if it seems like it isn't music that was intended for that film, I'm like, okay, well, you've kept this tune the whole time, even though, like, okay, well, now we're in a scene with like the bride-to-be and the ill-fated doctor, and now we're in a scene where we're like meeting the sinister character for the first time, but the music didn't change. It always the music frequently feels out of sync with the storytelling in these silent films. And I know we talked about this before. A lot of it has to do with, like, you know, public domain and what was available at the time and what was in the budget.
And also just the style of the era also was a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. And while I'm not going to say that Sleep Bomb had a different track or like hopped back and forth between different songs or pieces from literally one scene to another,
right?
But they created an absolute vibe. It was almost entrancing.
Man, now I'm super bummed I missed it.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe I'm like overselling it, but I felt very like just mentally massaged into the movie by the music.
It sounds fantastic. So yeah, don't apologize for that.
Well, I picked up their aside from buying like stickers and a T-shirt and a patch. I also picked up their DVD, which they've basically they're reselling the DVD with their soundtrack.
What's the group called again?
Sleep Bomb. I would show you the shirt again, but it's actually quite hard to read this font.
Well, no, I have the internet.
Yeah. But yeah, I have a DVD of exactly the experience that I just had, just on a disc.
Oh shit! They did a vinyl. Oh.
Yes, that I think the vinyl is in pre-order right now still.
Nice. All right.
Also, like, that's how much somebody loves this movie that they decided to make their own score for the movie.
I mean, that happens
the world on vinyl.
That happens with a lot of like horror films. There's been a few of Nosferatu. Philip Glass did an entire new score to Bela Lugosi's Dracula, which I find a little too bombastic for my tastes. But that happens a lot. So yeah.
Cool. But yeah, all this to say, it's a wonderful movie. It's beautiful to look at.
Do you think without the Sleep Bomb score, it would have affected you as much?
I don't know, and I can never now go back and experience it for the first time a different way.
Sure.
I mean, I am super curious to know, like, well, what is it originally played to? Like, right? Like,
yeah, I don't remember.
What is the music that people experienced this movie with the first several years of its life? I don't. That has become an unanswerable question, and I've spent a weird amount of time thinking about it in the last 3 days.
Would you want to watch one without their score and see how it works?
I do. I'm not like clamoring for it.
Yeah, I feel like if you do, like, seek out a good restore, because again, it's like a public domain movie now. So like every distribution dork who can get a hold of it has produced a version of it. I'd try to hunt down like a good version. Like if Criterion has one, I'd do that. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Well, because I got the DVD, and I think that you can do it like with or without the modern score. I don't know. I'll figure it out. Right. And I do want to do that, but I'm also not in any rush. I think I want to just kind of like continue to like soak in the experience that I just had. Which, by the way, is something I've never said about a silent era film. So, I know that music is deeply human and important, but I don't know that I can attribute how much I enjoyed the movie strictly to that.
I mean, it is possible. This is 100% not within the same genre, but there's this classic Hollywood story that the first time Miramax and Quentin Tarantino streamed Pulp Fiction to an audience without the music, it was one of the lowest rated screenings of all time. Then they did it again with the soundtrack, and it became one of the highest rating, and they made no edits other than the music. So,
Huh. Interesting. Well, it's weird because I don't really give a shit about Pulp Fiction.
I don't either. It's more of an anecdote of the power of music and film. Yeah, I don't.
No, you're right. You're right. Yeah, no, I agree. But again, like that's a thing that is now unknowable to me. I almost wondered before having seen it, and even now, or maybe especially now, like, should I have seen it in its original format before seeing it with a live band doing their own score?
But I think seeing it this way, you got what the filmmakers were trying to say. So it's valid.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I love the story that was told, and I loved the aesthetic also, which obviously didn't get changed from then to now. So yeah, I don't regret it at all. It was a wonderful experience, and I really, really enjoyed the movie itself, not just the
Hmm.
experience of having seen it under, these myriad circumstances. Um, enough so that I'd be like, I would recommend it as maybe anybody's first silent movie.
Sure. Well, before we wrap it up, I have one little thing. First off, that was really great. You make me extra bummed that I missed that night.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, no, I mean that is what it is. But I will, and I will kind of top this off with something that I feel like we can all look forward to for next year,
Hmm.
and that is Robert Eggers doing his interpretation of Nosferatu. So the guy that did The Vitch and The Lighthouse and Northman is doing Nosferatu.
Oh, put that on the calendar now.
It's already wrapped filming. It's got
Oh.
shocking no one. A Skarsgård is playing Nosferatu.
this is
I
this
do
is no
believe
shock.
it's Bill Skarsgård, the youngest.
Mm. The
Lily,
one who did
yeah,
it, right?
yes, yeah. So and of course, Aaron, Aaron Taylor Johnson is in it.
Do you mean
His
Anya
like,
Taylor Joy?
yeah. Why did they? No,
I don't know who Aaron Taylor Johnson is.
I don't either, but he's in it. Lily Rose Depp is in it, which is weird.
Hmm.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's Robert Eggers, who I love. I know The
Doing it.
Lighthouse was divisive for people, but I loved it. Anyway, it's him doing Nosferatu. It's him
Wow.
doing more bleak fucking horror. So
All right. So I guess I better get on that Nosferatu train before then.
I would love to show you the Werner Herzog Klaus Kinski one someday.
That's the one I would like to see first. I know there's an older version, but again, like
Well, there's the original, and then there's the Werner Herzog one. So
right.
that's been it actually.
That's true. So
Mm-hmm.
first time in a long time.
Okay.
There are certain versions of stories where I'm like, I know, like I've gleaned from the world that this is the one, Like
Right.
there's a 1920 or 1918 version of Frankenstein that's on the list. Um,
It's is it the Edison one?
I don't know. I don't know off the top of my
It's
head.
it's
I
not
just
long. It's like
I
20
just know there's
minutes.
an older one on the list, and I haven't pulled it, but I didn't say that's the one I need to see before I watch Bride.
It's not. It's don't watch that one. It's the one that like wanky film people like you must see the first Frankenstein. Like no, you don't.
Sorry, it's 1910.
I think that's the Edison one.
Yes, it is. The Edison kinetogram is like on the thumbnail there.
Yeah, it's as a piece of cinematic history, it is interesting. As a film, it is not good. It's just not.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. It's 16 minutes long. It's on YouTube. If you really want to watch it, watch it.
16 minutes long?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I mean,
well, shit was hard back then, man.
That's true. It's 10 years earlier than anything else I've seen.
Yeah, and it's like the monster in Edison Kinetogram Frankenstein looks more like a kabuki performer than a monster. It's weird. It's weird.
Well, again, I'm in no rush. If I pull it, I pull it. But
and just as a reminder, that era of filmmaking, like every other breakthrough of technology, only survived because of porn. Like they tried doing highbrow stuff, and someone's like, "But what if we film titties, dongs, and butts?"
Well, on that note,
and they're like, "That will put butts in the seats," and it did. It's. I didn't want to end on porn.
You brought us here.
But it was more of like a comment on. That's what saved VHS. That's why we have DVDs. That's why we have Blu-ray instead of HD DVD. It's It's why the internet survived the 90s. I know people don't like it, but porn keeps technology going. It's just, God damn it, Five-Star Fireco, you said we're giving everybody a happy ending. You're a monster.
Well, on that note.
On that note, we'll be back next week with probably more movies.
Probably.
I mean, maybe we can pull off the Return of the Living Dead. And what's the other one?
There are several other ones.
I know, but there was one that we're like, we'll watch them back to back or whatever. So
Phantom of the Opera, the 1980s.
Yeah, the Robert Englund one. Yeah,
yes.
That might be
Although
fun.
That one's not on the list, which is a crime. But
well, we've reviewed stuff that's not on the list this month already, so
it's true.
All right.
Fine.
Well, with that, I am Aaron Duran.
And I'm Binarita.
And we will see everybody next week. Bye.
Watch out for zombies.
Meh. Double tap.